Theme parks have built some truly bizarre machines in the name of thrills. A few pushed the design so far that operators had to shut them down, sometimes after awful accidents. Others are still around, famous for strange concepts that make even veteran riders sweat. Today, we're counting 30 strangest theme park rides ever built, and yes, some were banned. 1. Cannonball Loop, Action Park, New Jersey, USA. If you've ever seen the old photos of Action Park's most infamous invention, you probably wondered how it even got approved. The Cannonball Loop was exactly what it sounds like. A vertical water slide that twisted into a full loop before spitting riders into a shallow pool. The idea came from park owner Gene Mulvihill, who loved wild experiments more than he loved safety guidelines. His team built a giant fiberglass tube with almost no science behind it, then started testing it with dummies. Some of those test dummies came out missing limbs. Others jammed inside the loop. You'd think that would have been enough to kill the project, but it wasn't. The state eventually stepped in, demanding human testing. Action Park bribed employees with a $100 bill to give it a try. Workers later recalled bloody noses, missing teeth, and bruises that stretched across their bodies. It wasn't just about a bad landing at the bottom. It was the speed at which bodies slammed into the loop itself. Riders were tossed around like laundry in a dryer, and the friction burns from fiberglass walls made the experience unforgettable for all the wrong reasons. Even after those horrifying trial runs, Cannonball Loop opened to the public in 1985. The line was long because people wanted to say they'd conquered the death slide. It only took a few weeks for reality to set in. Riders were getting stuck in the middle of the loop, and the park had to cut side hatches into the slide so staff could pull them out. Others shot out of the exit unconscious. Lifeguards stationed at the pool started refusing to work that shift because every hour meant dragging another broken teenager out of the water. The ride closed, reopened, then closed again. Each time, inspectors flagged new problems: loose joints, dangerously high speeds, and a lack of structural support around the loop. But Mulvihill kept trying to sneak it back into operation, convinced it could become the park's signature attraction. It wasn't just poor design that doomed the ride. It was the stubborn belief that bigger and crazier automatically meant better. In reality, it only meant bloodier. By the 1990s, Cannonball Loop had turned into an urban legend. The slide still stood in the park like a rusting skeleton, photographed endlessly, but never ridden again. It wasn't dismantled until Action Park's final collapse years later. Today, people remember it as the ultimate symbol of Action Park's reckless spirit, a ride so strange and dangerous that it existed more as a dare than an actual attraction. 2. Verrückt, Schlitterbahn, Kansas City, Kansas, USA. When Schlitterbahn, Kansas City announced they were building the tallest water slide in the world, the news spread everywhere. The ride was named Verrückt, a German word meaning insane, and that word could not have been more accurate. Towering over 168 feet, it wasn't just taller than the Statue of Liberty's torch, it was taller than most city skyscrapers. People came from all over just to stand at the bottom and look up at the steep drop. Verrückt wasn't only about breaking records, it was about making water park history. But what should have been a proud achievement quickly turned into one of the darkest chapters in amusement park design. The slide was built in a rush. Engineers had to change the layout multiple times because test rafts kept flying off the track during early runs. Instead of fixing the root problem, designers added netting and metal supports to cage in the riders. It wasn't just about fun anymore. It was about containing the danger that was baked into the concept. Employees later admitted they never felt the ride was ready, but the park pushed forward anyway. In 2014, Verrückt opened to huge fanfare. Riders climbed 264 steps to the top, strapped into a raft, and then dropped at a near vertical angle before shooting over a massive hill. At first, people raved about the thrill. Videos showed screaming guests reaching speeds of up to 70 miles per hour. But behind the scenes, operators were quietly logging incident after incident. Rafts were unevenly balanced, safety belts didn't always hold tightly, and lighter riders sometimes went airborne. It wasn't just about adrenaline. It was Russian roulette with water. The tragedy came in 2016 when a 10-year-old boy, Caleb Schwab, boarded the slide. His raft went airborne, striking one of the overhead metal hoops. The force decapitated him instantly, while the two women seated behind him suffered severe injuries. Witnesses were traumatized. First responders described the scene as unlike anything they had ever faced at a park. The ride was shut down on the spot, and an investigation found layers of negligence, from unqualified design decisions to ignored safety warnings. Criminal charges were even filed against the designers and the park, though they were later dismissed. Verrückt never reopened. The towering structure loomed over the empty park for years, a grim reminder of how ambition had crossed the line into recklessness. In 2018, crews began dismantling it piece by piece. 3. Thunder River Rapids, Dreamworld, Queensland, Australia. River Rapids rides are usually the calm choice in a theme park. Families pile into circular rafts, get a little wet, and laugh as the water splashes around them. Dreamworld's Thunder River Rapids was supposed to be exactly that, a safe, family-friendly attraction that had been running since the 1980s. For decades, it carried millions of riders without much thought. But it wasn't just about a few bumps and splashes. Hidden inside the machinery was a problem that would turn a fun day out into one of Australia's worst amusement park disasters. On October 25, 2016, 6 passengers boarded a raft as usual. The ride used conveyor belts to push the heavy rafts back upstream toward the unloading area. That afternoon, one of the water pumps failed, causing the water level to drop. A raft got stuck on the conveyor rails, and seconds later, another raft slammed into it from behind. The impact flipped the raft upright like a toy, throwing 4 people into the path of the moving belt. 2 children survived by being thrown clear, but 4 adults were crushed and killed instantly. Witnesses described sheer panic, with other guests screaming for staff to hit the emergency stop. Investigators later uncovered a long list of failures. The ride had suffered breakdowns before, yet safety systems were never upgraded. Simple fixes like a water level sensor or an automatic emergency stop could have prevented the crash. It wasn't just about one broken pump. It was about a culture that treated safety as an afterthought. Staff had raised concerns, but management focused more on keeping the ride open than making real improvements. The accident shook Australia. News broadcasts ran non-stop coverage, and tributes poured in for the victims. Dreamworld shut down entirely for weeks, holding memorials on site. The park's reputation collapsed, visitor numbers dropped, and its parent company eventually paid millions in fines for negligence. For many Australians, the tragedy changed how they looked at theme parks. Rides that once felt harmless now carried an edge of doubt. Thunder River Rapids was permanently closed and later dismantled. Engineers and operators worldwide took note, rechecking systems that had been overlooked for years. Dreamworld has tried to move forward with new attractions, but the shadow of Thunder River Rapids will never completely fade. 4. Haunted Castle, Six Flags, Great Adventure, New Jersey, USA. Dark rides are supposed to scare you in a safe, playful way. Creepy music, flashing lights, a few jump scares. Then you step off laughing with your friends. At Six Flags, Great Adventure, in Jackson, New Jersey, the Haunted Castle promised exactly that when it opened in the late 1970s. It wasn't about massive drops or record-breaking speed. The fear came from the atmosphere, dim hallways, costumed actors, and walls designed to disorient. But what guests didn't know was that the real danger was built into the attraction itself. On the night of May 11, 1984, disaster struck. The castle was filled with guests weaving through its twisting paths when a fire broke out. Flames spread through the foam walls and plastic props in seconds. The structure had no sprinklers, no smoke detectors, and very little emergency lighting. Inside, the maze-like design became a trap. Panicked visitors couldn't find exits, and some mistook real smoke for part of the show until it was too late. By the time firefighters arrived, the building was engulfed. 8 teenagers lost their lives, and several others were badly injured. The aftermath revealed shocking neglect. The haunted castle was classified as a temporary structure, even though it had been standing for years, which meant it had bypassed normal building codes. Inspectors had overlooked the lack of fire safety equipment. Employees later testified that evacuation training was minimal. It wasn't just about one careless spark, it was an entire system of shortcuts and oversights that turned a funhouse into a death trap. Families of the victims pushed for accountability. Six Flags was charged with aggravated manslaughter, accused of putting profit over safety. The trial drew national attention. In the end, the company was acquitted, with the jury deciding the fire was arson and not directly caused by negligence. Still, the damage to the park's reputation was severe. Many saw the verdict as proof that loopholes and technicalities can shield corporations, even when tragedy strikes on their property. The haunted castle never reopened. Its smoldering remains were torn down, leaving behind an empty lot that served as a constant reminder of what had happened there. For theme park operators everywhere, the fire became a case study in what not to do. Building codes were tightened, and fire protection systems became standard requirements for dark rides across the country. 5. Ghost Train, Luna Park, Sydney, Australia. The Ghost Train at Sydney's Luna Park was meant to be a lighthearted scare. Riders boarded small carts, rolled through dark passages, and faced silly ghouls and glowing skeletons. It wasn't about real danger, just cheap thrills in the dark. But on June 9, 1979, the ride turned into a nightmare that scarred Australia forever. That evening, a fire broke out inside the attraction. At first, many visitors thought it was part of the show. Smoke drifting through the corridors didn't seem unusual for a haunted ride, but this wasn't staged. It was uncontrolled flames spreading through wooden walls and old wiring. Within minutes, the structure became a furnace. Families trapped inside panicked as visibility dropped to zero. The building had no sprinklers and no proper fire alarms. It wasn't just about slow response times. The ride was a death trap waiting for the smallest spark. 7 people, including a father and his 2 young sons, lost their lives in the blaze. The tragedy shook Sydney. Survivors spoke of clawing through smoke-filled corridors and smashing through flimsy panels to escape. Firefighters later described the scene as chaotic, with the ride collapsing around them as they tried to reach the victims. The cause of the fire was never officially determined. Some investigators pointed to an electrical fault, but others suspected arson. Rumors swirled about organized crime connections and corruption within the investigation itself. Witnesses claimed they had seen suspicious figures near the ride that night. For decades, the debate has continued, with survivors and campaigners demanding a full inquiry. It wasn't just about poor safety. It became a story tangled in secrecy and unanswered questions. Luna Park closed for years after the fire, its reputation badly damaged. The ghost train was gone, and for many Australians, so was their trust in the park. Even when Luna Park eventually reopened with new attractions, the memory of that night never disappeared. 6. Big Dipper, Battersea Park, London, UK. Roller coasters have always carried an edge of danger, but the Big Dipper at Battersea Park in London crossed that line in the worst way. Built in 1951 as the centerpiece of the park's festival gardens, the ride was one of the largest wooden coasters in the UK. For years, it thrilled families with its long track, steep climbs, and sweeping drops. It wasn't just about speed. It was about giving post-war Britain a taste of American-style amusement. But in May of 1972, the Big Dipper's story ended in tragedy. That afternoon, a train loaded with children and adults was being hauled up the first incline by a chain lift. Suddenly, the chain snapped. Instead of being caught by a safety mechanism, the cars rolled backward down the track. At high speed, they slammed into another train waiting in the loading area. The impact was catastrophic. 5 children were killed, and many others were seriously injured. Witnesses described chaos as parents screamed, rescuers rushed in, and the twisted wooden structure groaned under the weight of the wreckage. Investigations found multiple safety flaws. The anti-rollback device, which should have prevented the train from sliding back, was either missing or not functioning. The ride had already experienced a fire 2 years earlier, raising questions about how thoroughly it had been repaired. It wasn't just about one broken chain, it was years of neglect, shortcuts, and outdated design. The disaster shocked Britain. Amusement parks had long been seen as safe escapes for families, but Battersea's crash proved otherwise. The park shut down the ride immediately, and the Big Dipper was dismantled soon after. Public confidence never recovered. Within a few years, Battersea Park Fun Fair itself closed entirely, leaving behind a space where laughter had once echoed. For survivors and victims' families, the tragedy became a lasting scar. Newspapers carried images of mangled wood and broken tracks, and the Big Dipper entered history as the worst roller coaster accident in the UK. 7. The Smiler, Alton Towers, Staffordshire, UK. When Alton Towers unveiled the Smiler in 2013, it was marketed as a world record breaker. With 14 inversions, it promised more upside-down moments than any other roller coaster on Earth. The design was bold, a tangled mess of steel that looked almost impossible to follow with the naked eye. Riders were meant to feel like their senses were overloaded, their brains scrambled, their bodies twisted beyond recognition. It wasn't just about speed or height. The Smiler was built to overwhelm, but within just 2 years of operation, it became infamous for a crash that horrified the country. On June 2, 2015, 2 trains were operating on the track. One was empty, stuck on the ride's course due to a technical fault. The other was full of excited passengers. Due to a communication breakdown between the control system and staff, operators sent the loaded train into the section where the empty one sat. At around 50 miles per hour, the two collided. The sound of steel hitting steel echoed across the park, followed by screams. Riders were thrown forward violently, and the front car absorbed the full force of the impact. 2 passengers, both young women, suffered devastating leg injuries that required partial amputations. Others sustained broken bones and trauma that would last long after leaving the park. Rescue efforts took hours as emergency crews carefully dismantled parts of the track to reach the victims. For many onlookers, it was a scene they would never forget. A futuristic ride turned into a twisted cage of pain. The investigation revealed serious flaws. Engineers had disabled safety systems to restart the ride after a stoppage, a decision made under pressure to keep things moving. Training gaps, poor communication, and design complexity all came together in a perfect storm. It wasn't just about one mistake. It was about a chain of errors that stripped away the illusion of control. Alton Towers shut down for several days, and the Smiler itself remained closed for months. The park's owners faced heavy fines and public outrage. Even after repairs and improved safety systems, many riders admitted they could never look at the coaster the same way again. For them, the name Smiler felt cruelly ironic. 8. Mine Scrambler, Rye Playland, New York, USA. At first glance, the Mine Scrambler didn't look unusual. It was a common amusement ride style, with spinning cars whipping riders around in fast circles under flashing lights and blaring music. It wasn't about towering drops or record-breaking speeds. It was about disorientation, the kind of dizzy fun you find at county fairs. But at Rye Playland in New York, this small attraction became the setting for 2 separate tragedies that permanently damaged its reputation. The first incident happened in 2004, when a 7-year-old girl slipped from her seat. Somehow, the restraints meant to keep riders secure failed to hold her in place. She was thrown from the moving ride, and the force was so great that she did not survive. Investigators pointed to operator error and improper use of safety equipment, but the park chose to keep the ride running. It wasn't just about one failure. It was about a mindset that the show had to go on, no matter what. 3 years later, the Mine Scrambler struck again. This time, the victim was a 21-year-old park employee named Gabriella Garin. She had grown up visiting Playland and even worked there, familiar with its rides and routines. One evening, she was helping guests with their restraints when another operator mistakenly started the ride. Gabriella was still on the platform when the spinning cars launched into motion. She was pulled in and killed in an accident that stunned even veteran staff. The twin tragedies highlighted a disturbing pattern. The ride's design left too much room for human error. Safety protocols weren't followed with the urgency they demanded. The fact that 2 lives were lost in nearly identical circumstances showed this wasn't just bad luck. It was negligence layered on top of weak oversight. Public reaction was harsh. Parents who had once brought their children to Playland began questioning the park's safety culture. News outlets ran stories on past violations and raised questions about whether the park was cutting corners. It wasn't only about a spinning ride, it was about trust that had been broken. After the second death, the decision was made. The Mine Scrambler was shut down permanently, removed from Playland's lineup. The spot it once occupied eventually blended into the park's other attractions, but its history remains well known among locals. 9. Perilous Plunge, Knott's Berry Farm, California, USA. When Knott's Berry Farm unveiled Perilous Plunge in 2000, it was billed as one of the tallest and steepest water rides in the world. Riders climbed into oversized boats, ascended more than 100 feet, and then dropped at a breathtaking angle into a pool below. The splash was massive, and walls of water drenched everyone in and around the ride. It wasn't just about a thrill, it was about spectacle. People gathered just to watch the tidal wave crash down, cheering as soaked riders stumbled out laughing. But behind the spectacle was a design that carried risks not immediately obvious. Just 1 year later, tragedy struck. In September 2001, a woman riding Perilous Plunge somehow slipped from her restraints during the drop. She fell to her death in front of horrified onlookers. The restraints had been designed to hold riders tightly, but questions quickly surfaced about whether the system was reliable enough for the ride's intensity. Investigators looked into whether the safety bar had been properly secured or if smaller riders could slip through. Knots kept the ride operating, but the death haunted its reputation. Engineers attempted to improve safety by modifying the restraints and procedures. Instead of solving the problem, the adjustments created new headaches. Boats suffered mechanical issues, the ride stalled more often, and guests complained about long downtimes. The initial excitement gave way to frustration, and Perilous Plunge became known more for its unreliability than its thrills. Through the years, the ride's presence loomed awkwardly over Knott's Berry Farm. Some guests still lined up for the record-breaking splash, but others avoided it altogether, uneasy about its history. The park worked to reassure the public, but the shadow of the 2001 accident never lifted. It wasn't just about technical fixes. It was about broken confidence, something no retrofit could fully repair. Finally, in 2012, Knott's made the call. Perilous Plunge was dismantled, its towering drop reduced to rubble. In its place came new attractions, ones that carried excitement without the baggage of tragedy. For many, the closure felt overdue. A ride that had opened with so much promise ended up defined by its flaws. 10. Derby Racer, Revere Beach, Massachusetts, USA. Revere Beach in Massachusetts was once filled with wooden roller coasters that rattled and roared along the coastline. Among them, the Derby Racer stood out, not for being the tallest or the fastest, but for being the most unpredictable. Built in the early 1900s, this coaster used side friction technology, meaning the trains didn't have modern underwheels to hold them securely to the track. Riders sat high above the rails with very little to keep them in place. It wasn't just about thrills. It was about testing the limits of what people were willing to risk for excitement. From the start, the Derby Racer had a reputation for danger. The coaster was fast, aggressive, and bumpy, with tight turns that tossed riders from side to side. Accidents began piling up quickly. Passengers were thrown from the trains in separate incidents over the years. And unlike most coasters, where the occasional scrape might be expected, these crashes were deadly. Historical records point to at least 5 separate fatalities linked to the ride, a staggering number by any standard. One of the most chilling details was how preventable the accidents could have been. The ride relied on minimal restraints, often just a simple lap bar or nothing at all. In an age before rigorous safety codes, designers believed the thrill came from riders feeling free. That freedom, however, costs lives. The coaster's rough structure also demanded constant upkeep, but wooden rides of that era often suffered from loose bolts, warped boards, and weak joints. When maintenance wasn't thorough, the risks multiplied. Despite the deaths, Derby Racer continued to run for decades. It became a strange attraction in its own right, a roller coaster known as much for its body count as for its thrills. Locals treated it with a mix of fascination and fear. Some swore they'd never step foot on it, while others bragged about surviving a ride. It wasn't just entertainment anymore. It was a dare. By 1936, the accidents and bad publicity finally caught up. The Derby Racer was demolished, ending its run as one of the most notorious coasters in American history. Its reputation was so dark that it overshadowed other rides at Revere Beach, including another wooden coaster, Lightning, which also killed a rider within just 2 days of opening. 11. Thunder River Rapids, Dreamworld, Queensland, Australia. River Rapids rides are usually the most family-friendly attractions in a park. You climb into a round raft, splash through waves, maybe get a little soaked, and walk away laughing. That was the idea behind the Thunder River Rapids at Dreamworld in Queensland, Australia. Opened in 1986, it became one of the park's signature rides, giving generations of families a way to cool down in the sun. It wasn't just about thrills, it was about shared fun that parents and kids could enjoy together. But in 2016, this ride became the scene of Australia's worst amusement park disaster. On October 25th, 6 people were riding in one raft when something went wrong with the conveyor belt system that carried boats out of the water. A malfunction caused one raft to get stuck on the track, unable to move forward. Within seconds, another raft carrying 6 more people was pushed into it from behind. The impact was enough to flip one of the boats. In the chaos, 4 riders were trapped against the conveyor mechanism, crushed, and killed instantly. 2 children miraculously survived, thrown clear before the raft flipped, but they witnessed the deaths of their family members. The nation was horrified. News broadcasts played footage of emergency crews rushing through the park as stunned visitors looked on. Dreamworld closed its gates for weeks, but public outrage demanded more than a pause. Investigators revealed a shocking trail of problems. The ride had a history of breakdowns, mechanical faults, and ignored warnings. Simple safety measures like a water level monitor that could have prevented the malfunction had never been installed. Staff training was patchy, emergency procedures were weak, and maintenance standards were nowhere near what they should have been. Dreamworld's parent company, Ardent Leisure, was fined 2.8 million Australian dollars for safety breaches, one of the largest penalties in the country's history. The Thunder River Rapids ride was permanently decommissioned and later dismantled. Where it once stood, there is now only a space and a memorial to the 4 people who died. 12. Haunted Castle, Six Flags. Great Adventure, New Jersey, USA. In the early 1980s, haunted house attractions were everywhere. Cheap thrills built with plywood walls, dim lighting, and jump scares. Six Flags. Great Adventure in New Jersey decided to up the ante with its haunted castle, a sprawling walk-through maze of dark corridors, eerie sound effects, and costumed actors. It wasn't designed to terrify in the psychological sense. It was more about fun scares and atmosphere. But on May 11, 1984, this funhouse turned into a nightmare that remains one of the deadliest amusement park disasters in history. That evening, the castle was crowded with teenagers out for a good time. The attraction was built from 17 interconnected trailers with narrow passageways and very few exits. Around 6:30 p.m., a fire broke out inside. It spread fast, feeding on the wood, foam, and flammable props that lined the halls. In minutes, smoke filled the building, turning a playful maze into a death trap. The attraction had no sprinklers, no alarms, and inadequate emergency lighting. 8 teenagers became trapped inside. Disoriented by the darkness and blinded by smoke, they couldn't find a way out. Firefighters later discovered their bodies huddled together, having succumbed to the flames. Survivors described scenes of panic, screaming guests pushing through pitch-black corridors, unsure whether they were running toward an exit or deeper into danger. Some initially thought the fire was part of the attraction, losing precious seconds before realizing it was real. The investigation was damning. The haunted castle had been operating without basic fire safety systems. Officials pointed out that sprinklers alone could have suppressed the flames before they spread. Six Flags argued the fire was caused by arson, but prosecutors pursued manslaughter charges against the park, citing negligence. In the end, Six Flags was acquitted, but the trial revealed how lax building codes and oversight had allowed such a hazard to exist. 13. Sydney Ghost Train Fire, Luna Park, Australia. Luna Park in Sydney had been entertaining families since the 1930s, with its giant smiling entrance gate and classic carnival rides. One of its most popular attractions was the Ghost Train, a dark ride that carried guests through spooky scenes of skeletons, monsters, and cheap but charming effects. It wasn't the scariest ride by design, but in June 1979, it became infamous for something far more terrifying than any stage prop. On the night of June 9th, a fire broke out inside the ride. At first, the smoke curling from the building didn't alarm visitors. Many thought it was part of the attraction, but within minutes, flames engulfed the wooden structure. Riders inside had almost no chance. The corridors were narrow, the lighting was dim, and the emergency exits were inadequate. By the time firefighters arrived, the blaze had already taken hold. When the fire was finally brought under control, the destruction was total. 7 people had lost their lives, 6 children and 1 adult, trapped inside the burning ride. The public was horrified. Families who had dropped off their kids for a night of fun were left devastated. Survivors recalled the confusion outside the ride, where crowds didn't realize the danger until it was too late. Witnesses said the screams from inside were drowned out by the chaos of the park. The tragedy sparked controversy that lingers even today. The official investigation never determined the exact cause of the fire. Some suggested faulty wiring, others pointed to a discarded cigarette, but rumors of arson began circulating, with claims that organized crime figures wanted the land for redevelopment, Former police officers even alleged that corruption at the time stopped the case from being properly investigated. To this day, no one has been held accountable. Luna Park shut down shortly after the fire, and though it eventually reopened years later with new rides, the ghost train was gone forever. For many Australians, the fire wasn't just about a theme park accident. It became a symbol of unanswered questions and the failure of authorities to deliver justice. At the entrance to the park now, a memorial honors the 7 victims, John Godson and his 2 young sons, along with 4 teenage boys. The smiling face of Luna Park remains an iconic Sydney landmark, but for those who remember 1979, it's impossible to see it without also thinking of the tragedy hidden in its past. 14. Big Dipper, Battersea Fun Fair, London, UK. In post-war London, Battersea Fun Fair was a bright spot for families looking for escape and joy. Its star attraction was the Big Dipper, a wooden roller coaster that had thrilled riders since the 1920s. Generations of kids grew up riding it, and for decades, it was a symbol of simple, old-fashioned fun. But in the summer of 1972, this coaster became the stage for Britain's deadliest amusement park disaster. On August 30th, a train full of children and parents climbed the first incline of the Big Dipper. Suddenly, the chain that hauled the cars uphill snapped. With nothing to hold them, the cars rolled backwards, gathering speed as they flew into the station area. The runaway train smashed into another car waiting to depart, derailing in a splintering crash of wood and steel. 5 children were killed, and more than a dozen others were injured, some seriously. Survivors spoke of chaos, of being thrown from seats, of screams cutting through the wreckage as the ride's structure buckled. What made the disaster worse was that it wasn't the first warning sign. The Big Dipper had already suffered a fire in 1970, though it had been repaired and put back into service. Safety checks at the time were far less rigorous than what we'd expect today, and wooden coasters were known for requiring constant maintenance. It wasn't just about bad luck, it was about a system that hadn't kept up with the demands of safety. The tragedy sent shockwaves through the UK. Newspapers splashed photos of the wreckage across front pages, and public confidence in Battersea Fun Fair collapsed. Parents who once trusted the park suddenly saw it as dangerous. Attendance plummeted, and the park never truly recovered. Within a few years, Battersea Fun Fair was closed for good, its rides dismantled, and its grounds eventually redeveloped. The Big Dipper's collapse forced British authorities to rethink how amusement rides were regulated. Stricter inspections and clearer maintenance requirements were introduced, and operators could no longer take for granted that decades-old rides would keep running without serious investment in safety. 15. Verrückt Water Slide, Schlitterbahn, Kansas City, USA. When Schlitterbahn unveiled Verrückt in 2014, it was marketed as a world record breaker, the tallest water slide on Earth. Towering over 168 feet, it looked more like a skyscraper than a ride. Riders had to climb hundreds of stairs just to reach the starting platform, where they were strapped into rafts and sent hurtling down a drop steeper than many roller coasters. It wasn't just about thrills. It was about bragging rights. The name itself means insane in German, and for a while, Verrückt lived up to its hype as a daredevil's dream. But the design pushed far past what water rides were proven to handle. Instead of a simple straight plunge, Verrückt had a massive first drop followed by a hump designed to give riders airtime. The rafts, carrying up to 3 people, were supposed to stay low against the slide. In reality, weight distribution played a huge role in whether a raft would behave as expected. Some flew too high off the crest, creating terrifying moments even during testing. Engineers were worried long before the public ever set foot on it, but the ride opened anyway. Then came August 2016. A raft carrying 10-year-old Caleb Schwab went airborne on the second hill and collided with the netting and metal supports meant to keep rafts contained. The impact was catastrophic, and Caleb was killed instantly. The accident made global headlines, not only because of the horror of what happened, but also because Caleb was the son of a Kansas state legislator. Investigations revealed a shocking trail of negligence. Verrückt had skipped important safety testing and didn't meet international engineering standards. Warnings about design flaws had been brushed aside in the rush to create a record-breaking attraction. Prosecutors even filed charges of second-degree murder against the ride's designers and park officials, though the case later collapsed in court due to a lack of solid evidence. Still, the damage was permanent. Schlitterbahn closed Verrückt immediately, and 2 years later, it was torn down piece by piece, Instead of standing as a monument to thrill engineering, it became a cautionary tale about what happens when ambition outruns responsibility. 16. Mine Scrambler, Playland, New York, USA. The Mine Scrambler at Playland in Rye, New York looked harmless enough at first glance. It was one of those classic spinning rides, where riders sit in cars that whirl around a central point, the kind of attraction that's been around for decades at fairs and amusement parks. Families didn't expect it to be especially dangerous. It wasn't just about thrills here. It was about a quick spin of excitement before moving on to bigger rides. But over its time at Playland, the Mine Scrambler became associated with tragedy, not once, but twice. The first incident came in 2004, when a 7-year-old girl slipped out of her seat and was fatally ejected while the ride was in motion. Investigators determined she hadn't been secured properly and that safety checks weren't being followed carefully. In response, the park added new rules and procedures, including tighter seatbelt requirements and stricter oversight of operators. For a time, it seemed like the lessons had been learned. But just 3 years later, in 2007, history repeated itself in a hauntingly similar way. Gabriella Guerin, a 21-year-old park employee who had grown up visiting Playland, was helping with the restraints when the ride unexpectedly started. She was thrown off and killed in front of horrified guests. The fact that she was a staff member only deepened the sense of shock. The very rules put in place after the first accident weren't followed, and the result was another young life lost. After the second tragedy, officials had no choice. The Mine Scrambler was shut down permanently. For Playland, which had long been a family-friendly landmark in New York, the ride's history cast a long shadow. It wasn't just a freak accident. It was evidence of repeated failures in both design oversight and staff training. What made it particularly disturbing was how ordinary the ride seemed. Unlike towering coasters or massive water slides, the Mine Scrambler didn't look intimidating. Parents assumed it was safe for kids because it wasn't extreme. But the truth is, even the most modest attractions can become deadly if procedures aren't taken seriously. 17. The Smiler, Alton Towers, UK. When it opened in 2013, the Smiler at Alton Towers was marketed as the world's first 14-loop roller coaster. Its tangled steel layout looked like a knot of tracks piled on top of itself, creating the illusion that trains might collide as they threaded through the mess of inversions. It wasn't just about setting a record. It was about giving riders sensory overload. With flashing lights, disorienting visuals, and a relentless pace, the Smiler quickly became one of the UK's most talked about coasters. But its legacy took a dark turn in June 2015. That day, 2 trains ended up on the same section of track when a stationary car was mistakenly left on the circuit. A fully loaded train carrying 16 passengers was launched into motion, and at nearly 40 miles per hour, it slammed directly into the empty train. The crash left riders trapped in their seats, mangled metal surrounding them. 2 young passengers suffered catastrophic injuries, both losing their legs. Others sustained serious wounds that would change their lives forever. The incident shocked the country. Alton Towers, known as a family-friendly resort, was suddenly at the center of headlines that asked how such an advanced ride could fail so badly. Investigations revealed human error played a major role. Operators overrode safety systems, mistakenly believing the empty train was off the track. It wasn't just a technical failure, it was a breakdown in procedure and judgment. The park closed the Smiler for months while improvements were made. Additional safety protocols, stricter checks, and redesigned systems were introduced. When the coaster eventually reopened in 2016, it carried with it a stigma. For some thrill seekers, the danger only added to the attraction's reputation as the ultimate test of nerve. For others, the thought of stepping onto it was unthinkable. 18. Derby Racer, Revere Beach, Boston, USA. Long before today's steel giants dominated skylines, wooden roller coasters were the main draw at American seaside amusement parks. Revere Beach in Massachusetts, one of the busiest boardwalks in the early 20th century, had its own collection of wooden thrill rides. The most notorious of them all was the Derby Racer, a coaster that earned a reputation not for its thrills alone, but for the unusually high number of riders who never made it back safely. The Derby Racer wasn't just about speed. It was designed as a side-by-side racing coaster, with 2 trains running in parallel to simulate competition. That concept sounded exciting on paper, but in practice, It magnified the risks, sharp turns, flimsy restraints, and a track that demanded more from riders than it gave in security, turned every ride into a gamble. Reports suggest that at least 5 people lost their lives over the years, most of them thrown from the cars during sharp maneuvers. In an era before modern harnesses, a simple lap bar, or in some cases just a handhold, was all that kept passengers in place. One of the worst incidents happened when a rider was flung from the train and struck the support beams before crashing to the ground. These stories spread quickly through Boston newspapers, giving the Derby racer a grim notoriety. Still, crowds kept coming, drawn to the danger as much as the thrill. The culture around amusement rides back then was very different. Accidents were often treated as part of the risk, rather than a sign of negligence. By the mid-1930s, the coaster's reputation had caught up with it. Public trust eroded, and maintenance issues piled on. In 1936, the Derby racer was finally dismantled, ending a chapter of roller coaster history that felt more like a survival test than a form of entertainment. 19. Thunder River Rapids, Dreamworld, Australia. River Rapids rides are usually considered the safer side of theme park thrills. Families hop into a round raft, bump along through swirling currents, and end up soaked but laughing. At Dreamworld in Queensland, Australia, the Thunder River Rapids fit that mold for decades. It wasn't just about adrenaline here. It was about sharing a wet and wild experience across generations. That image shattered on October 25, 2016, when the ride became the site of one of the country's deadliest amusement park disasters. That afternoon, 2 rafts entered the unloading area at the same time. One had become stuck on the conveyor belt, while another raft carrying 6 people came up behind it. Instead of stopping, the moving raft collided with the stranded one. The impact lifted it upright, trapping 4 riders in a horrific instant. 2 were ejected and crushed against the machinery, while 2 others were pulled beneath the conveyor belt itself. None of them survived. Witnesses described the scene as chaos and disbelief. For years, families had queued up for what seemed like harmless fun, and suddenly, they were watching emergency crews swarm over a broken raft. The entire park shut down immediately, and news of the tragedy dominated Australian headlines for weeks. It wasn't just about one accident. It was about a system of oversight that had failed at every level. The investigation that followed uncovered a disturbing picture. The ride had a long history of malfunctions, including pumps that had failed before. Maintenance logs showed problems that were never properly fixed. Worse still, safety systems that could have prevented the accident, like automatic water level monitors, had never been installed. Regulators concluded that the disaster was entirely preventable, the result of poor maintenance and complacency. Dreamworld's parent company, Ardent Leisure, faced a massive backlash. Attendance plummeted, lawsuits piled in, and the park was eventually fined $2.8 million for safety breaches. The ride itself was permanently closed and later dismantled, leaving behind an empty patch of land where families once floated past artificial rapids. 20. Haunted Castle Fire, Six Flags, Great Adventure, New Jersey, USA. Dark rides are usually low risk compared to towering coasters or free-fall towers. They're built for atmosphere, jump scares, and mood. But in May 1984, the Haunted Castle at Six Flags Great Adventure in Jackson, New Jersey, turned into one of the most horrifying amusement park disasters ever recorded. It wasn't just a ride gone wrong. It was a structure that became a death trap. The Haunted Castle was a walk-through attraction made up of 16 connected trailers, filled with cheap props, dim lighting, and plywood walls covered in black paint. Guests wandered through winding corridors while actors and effects jumped out at them. On the night of May 11th, a group of teenagers entered the castle. Somewhere inside, a fire broke out, likely sparked by a lighter. Within minutes, the flames spread through the highly flammable construction materials. The corridors filled with smoke, the lights went out, and panic set in. 8 teenagers never made it out. They became trapped in the maze of smoke and flame, their screams heard outside as the building collapsed into a charred ruin. Survivors described fumbling through total darkness, unable to find the exits while the fire ate away at everything around them. The scene was chaotic and devastating, with firefighters arriving too late to save those inside. The investigation that followed revealed jaw-dropping negligence. The haunted castle had no sprinklers. It had no smoke alarms. Its construction was so shoddy that officials debated whether it even counted as a building under code. Six Flags was taken to court on manslaughter charges, accused of cutting corners and ignoring safety. The company argued that arson was to blame, and in 1985, a jury found them not guilty. Still, the public outcry was immense, and safety standards for temporary structures and haunted attractions were rewritten across the United States. 21. Sydney Luna Park Ghost Train Fire, Australia. On June 9, 1979, Sydney's Luna Park became the stage for a disaster that would haunt Australia for decades. The Ghost Train ride, a seemingly harmless haunted attraction, went up in flames late at night, trapping riders inside. It wasn't just a ride malfunction. It was an inferno that took 7 lives, including 6 children and 1 father who had taken them for a fun evening out. The Ghost Train was a classic dark ride, with rickety carts that crept along winding tracks past cobwebs, skeletons, and other low-budget scares. But behind the props, the structure was a patchwork of old timber and flammable materials. That night, a fire ignited within the ride. Smoke filled the tunnels, and wooden walls became fuel for a blaze that spread too fast for anyone inside to escape. By the time firefighters arrived, the building was engulfed. Rescue workers pulled out the carts, but for those trapped deeper inside, it was too late. The tragedy shook the nation. Families who had sent their kids into a carnival-style funhouse were left with nothing but questions. How could a park in the middle of Sydney's Harbour District have allowed such an unsafe attraction to operate? Investigators pointed to faulty wiring and poor maintenance, but rumors of arson began almost immediately. Witnesses reported seeing suspicious figures near the ride before the blaze started. Over time, allegations of organized crime involvement and police corruption only deepened the mystery. No one was ever held accountable. The official cause of the fire remains inconclusive, and survivors and relatives of the victims have campaigned for decades for a full inquiry. Their grief was compounded by the sense that the truth was buried alongside the ashes of the Ghost Train. The fire also marked a turning point for Luna Park itself. The ride was destroyed and never rebuilt, and the entire park shut down the following year. It wasn't just about repairing the damage. It was about a loss of trust. For many Australians, Luna Park became a symbol of carelessness and unanswered questions, rather than laughter and lighthearted fun. 22. The Cyclone, Coney Island, New York, USA. Few rides are as iconic as the Cyclone, the towering wooden roller coaster that has defined Coney Island since 1927. It's a landmark in every sense of the word, drawing thrill seekers from around the world who want to feel the rattle of history under their feet. It wasn't just another ride. It became a cultural symbol of New York City itself, but behind its fame lies a checkered record that proves nostalgia and danger often rode side by side. The Cyclone climbs to nearly 90 feet, sending riders down a steep first drop before tossing them through tight turns and sharp hills at 60 miles per hour. For decades, the thrill outweighed the risk. Its lap bar system was basic by today's standards. No harnesses, no seatbelts, just a simple bar across the lap. That simplicity, paired with the coaster's aggressive design, created conditions where rider behavior could quickly turn deadly. In 1985, tragedy struck when a man stood up mid-ride, either chasing an extra jolt of adrenaline or simply not realizing the danger. He hit a crossbeam and was thrown from the train, a fall that ended his life. Just 3 years later, another man attempted the same reckless stunt on a steep descent. He, too, was ejected and did not survive. The coaster itself hadn't malfunctioned. The restraint design and rider choices combined to make fatal outcomes possible. Instead of redesigning the restraint system, operators added more warning signs, including a large remain seated notice at the peak of the first climb. It was a cheap fix rather than a structural one. And yet, the Cyclone kept running, its reputation only growing as thrill seekers claimed it separated the bold from the timid. For Coney Island, the coaster was too important to shut down. It wasn't just about entertainment, it was about history, tourism, and identity. Today, the Cyclone is still in operation, renovated with reinforced wood and updated trains, but its minimalist restraint system remains part of the ride's old-school character. That character, though, is inseparable from the tragedies of its past. 23. Hypersonic XLC, Kings Dominion, Virginia, USA. When Hypersonic XLC opened at Kings Dominion in 2001, it looked like the future of roller coasters had arrived. Built with a revolutionary air-powered launch system, the ride promised an experience unlike anything else in the United States. It wasn't just about speed, it was about compressing pure acceleration into a few breathless seconds. riders went from to 80 miles per hour in just 1.5 seconds, shooting straight up a 165-foot tower before diving into a near vertical drop. For thrill seekers, it was like being strapped to a rocket, but with experimental technology came unpredictable problems. The launch system was loud, temperamental, and constantly in need of repair. A ride that was supposed to feel futuristic often felt broken down instead. On busy summer days, it wasn't unusual for guests to wait hours in line, only to be told the coaster was closed for technical difficulties. Rumors began spreading about injuries, particularly dislocated shoulders and neck strain caused by the violent launch. Some riders claimed that raising their arms during takeoff left them in agony, while lawsuits were whispered about. The truth was more complicated. The ride's biggest enemy wasn't the occasional sore shoulder, it was reliability. Being a prototype, Hypersonic XLC needed months of off-season maintenance just to limp through a few weeks of operation. King's Dominion tried to keep it alive, but the math never worked. A marquee coaster that spent more time shut down than running was a drain on resources and a frustration for park guests. After only 6 years, Hypersonic XLC closed permanently in 2007. For a ride that promised to revolutionize coasters, its lifespan was shockingly short. The remains were quietly dismantled, and no other park wanted to inherit the headache. Its manufacturer, S&S Worldwide, did refine their air launch concept and sold versions overseas, but Hypersonic XLC was remembered as more of a failed experiment than a triumph. Yet for those who did get to ride it, the memory lingers. The insane jolt of the launch, the stomach-turning vertical climb, the sensation of being hurled into the sky. It was something you couldn't find anywhere else in America at the time. 24. Mine Scrambler, Playland, New York, USA. On the surface, the Mine Scrambler at Playland in Rye, New York, didn't look unusual. It was one of those classic indoor scrambler rides, a spinning platform that whipped riders around in dizzying circles under flashing lights and booming music. The kind of attraction you'd expect to find at nearly any carnival or park. But its history wasn't just about cheap thrills. It became infamous after claiming not one, but 2 lives in less than a decade. The first tragedy happened in 2004, when a 7-year-old girl slipped out of her seat and was thrown from the ride. She was killed instantly. The investigation revealed that operators hadn't followed safety rules carefully enough, and new procedures were introduced to prevent another accident. Parents were reassured, the ride was altered, and officials believed the danger had been addressed. 3 years later, in 2007, the unthinkable happened again. This time, it wasn't a child, but a 21-year-old park employee named Gabriella Guerin. She had grown up going to Playland and loved the park so much that she worked there. On the night of her death, she was checking restraints for riders when another operator mistakenly started the machine. Gabriella was thrown from the moving platform, and the impact proved fatal. For a park known as a family destination, 2 deaths tied to the same ride were more than just bad luck. It was a devastating blow to its reputation. Questions swirled about whether Playland management had prioritized speed and convenience over safety training. State investigators looked closely at the park's practices, but for many locals, the damage was already done. The Mine Scrambler was shut down permanently after Gabriella's death. The ride that had once been a glowing centerpiece in the darkened building was dismantled, leaving behind a space and a painful memory for the community. 25. Verrückt Water Slide, Schlitterbahn, Kansas City, USA. When it opened in 2014, Verrückt was marketed as the crown jewel of Schlitterbahn, Kansas City, a water slide so massive it broke world records. Towering 168 feet tall, it wasn't just about being a ride, it was a dare. Riders climbed hundreds of steps to the top before being strapped into a raft that would drop them at freeway speeds down a near vertical slope, then rocket them up a second hill before plunging back down. It looked like something ripped from a stuntman's sketchbook, rather than a family water park blueprint. The hype was enormous. Verrückt earned the title of world's tallest water slide and became a media sensation. Reporters broadcast live from the launch platform, and early riders described the plunge as both exhilarating and terrifying. But the cracks in the dream were there from the beginning. Test rafts flew off the slide during development, and sandbags used in trials sometimes went airborne. Designers rushed to patch problems to meet deadlines, but the warning signs weren't just whispers, they were loud. The illusion of safety collapsed on August 7, 2016. 10-year-old Caleb Schwab, the son of a Kansas state legislator, boarded the slide with 2 adult women. During the descent, The raft became airborne due to a weight imbalance and struck a metal support hoop. Caleb was killed instantly in a gruesome accident that horrified the nation. The women survived, but suffered serious injuries. Witnesses described the scene as chaotic, with lifeguards and guests in shock at what had unfolded on what was supposed to be a summer day of fun. The aftermath was explosive. Verrückt was closed immediately and never reopened. A criminal investigation followed, with prosecutors charging the ride's designers and park officials with reckless behavior and even second-degree murder. While the charges were eventually dropped, the case pulled back the curtain on just how rushed and unsafe the project had been. Reports revealed that the ride skipped standard engineering reviews and ignored basic safety practices in the race for a headline-grabbing attraction. By 2018, Verrückt was dismantled, leaving nothing but an empty field where the record-breaking slide once stood. Instead of being remembered as an engineering triumph, it became a symbol of hubris and negligence. 26. Darby Racer, Revere Beach, Massachusetts, USA. Back in the early 1900s, seaside amusement parks were booming, and Revere Beach in Massachusetts was one of the busiest. Among its most infamous attractions was the Darby Racer, a wooden roller coaster that earned a deadly reputation. Unlike today's carefully engineered thrill machines, this ride was built in an era when safety standards were little more than an afterthought. Riders climbed into open cars secured by nothing more than simple lap restraints, or in some cases, nothing at all, and were hurled around. Sharp curves at breakneck speed. The coaster's main gimmick was its racing design. Two trains ran side by side, mimicking a horse race as they barreled around the track. For riders, that sense of competition only encouraged reckless behavior. People leaned out of their cars, waved to friends on the other train, or even tried to stand up for the thrill of it. The result was chaos. Over the years, at least 5 people died on the Darby Racer, most of them thrown from the trains during high-speed turns. Newspapers of the time described gruesome accidents in matter-of-fact language, as if danger was part of the attraction. In fact, the ride's reputation for injury only seemed to draw bigger crowds. People came not just for the speed, but for the chance to flirt with death. Eventually, the coaster's reputation became too much for the park to ignore. After multiple fatal incidents, the Darby Racer was demolished in 1936. By then, it had already cemented its place in history as one of the deadliest rides ever built. What makes the story of the Darby Racer so strange isn't just the accidents, it's the cultural mindset of the time. Thrill rides weren't expected to be safe in the way they are today. In some ways, the danger was the selling point. Visitors lined up knowing full well that a ride on the Darby Racer wasn't guaranteed to end with laughter. And yet the allure of speed and risk was irresistible. 26. Darby Racer, Revere Beach, Massachusetts, USA. Back in the early 1900s, seaside amusement parks were booming, and Revere Beach in Massachusetts was one of the busiest. Among its most infamous attractions was the Darby Racer, a wooden roller coaster that earned a deadly reputation. Unlike today's carefully engineered thrill machines, this ride was built in an era when safety standards were little more than an afterthought. Riders climbed into open cars secured by nothing more than simple lap restraints, or in some cases, nothing at all, and were hurled around. Sharp curves at breakneck speed. The coaster's main gimmick was its racing design. Two trains ran side by side, mimicking a horse race as they barreled around the track. For riders, that sense of competition only encouraged reckless behavior. People leaned out of their cars, waved to friends on the other train, or even tried to stand up for the thrill of it. The result was chaos. Over the years, at least 5 people died on the Darby Racer, most of them thrown from the trains during high-speed turns. Newspapers of the time described gruesome accidents in matter-of-fact language, as if danger was part of the attraction. In fact, the ride's reputation for injury only seemed to draw bigger crowds. People came not just for the speed, but for the chance to flirt with death. Eventually, the coaster's reputation became too much for the park to ignore. After multiple fatal incidents, the Darby Racer was demolished in 1936. By then, it had already cemented its place in history as one of the deadliest rides ever built. What makes the story of the Darby Racer so strange isn't just the accidents, it's the cultural mindset of the time. Thrill rides weren't expected to be safe in the way they are today. In some ways, the danger was the selling point. Visitors lined up knowing full well that a ride on the Derby Racer wasn't guaranteed to end with laughter. And yet the allure of speed and risk was irresistible. 27. Big Dipper, Battersea Fun Fair, London, UK. In post-war London, Battersea Fun Fair was supposed to be a cheerful escape for families. Its star attraction was the Big Dipper, a classic wooden roller coaster that towered over the park. For years, it thrilled riders with steep drops and rattling turns. But in 1972, it became the scene of Britain's worst ever theme park disaster. On the evening of May 30th, crowds packed the fair during a school holiday. Children piled into the Big Dipper's cars, excited for a ride that was considered a safe, family-friendly classic. But as one train was hauled up the first hill, something went horribly wrong. The lift chain that pulled the cars upward snapped. With nothing to hold them, the cars rolled backward down the incline. They jumped the track and smashed into another train waiting at the station. The crash was devastating. 5 children were killed, and many more were seriously injured. Survivors described a scene of panic, with families screaming and rescuers rushing to pull victims from the wreckage. The tragedy shocked the nation. For a country that saw theme parks as innocent fun, it was unthinkable that something so horrific could happen in the middle of London. Investigators quickly discovered that the ride had a history of mechanical problems. The lift chain had failed before, and temporary fixes had been used instead of permanent repairs. Safety procedures were lax, and operators had few ways to stop the runaway cars once the chain broke. In hindsight, the accident was not a freak occurrence. It was a disaster waiting to happen. The fallout was immediate. The Big Dipper was shut down on the spot and never reopened. Battersea Fun Fair itself never recovered from the tragedy, and public trust in the park evaporated. By the 1970s, its reputation was tarnished beyond repair, and the fair eventually closed for good in 1974. 28. Haunted Castle Fire, Six Flags, Great Adventure, New Jersey, USA. In the early 1980s, haunted house attractions were a staple of theme parks. They promised cheap scares with dim lighting, spooky sound effects, and mannequins popping out at just the right moment. At Six Flags Great Adventure in Jackson, New Jersey, the haunted castle was meant to be exactly that, a temporary low-budget walk-through maze of frights. But on May 11, 1984, it turned into one of the darkest chapters in amusement park history. The attraction was built from 17 interconnected trailers, patched together with plywood walls and plastic props. Fireproofing, non-existent. Smoke detectors and sprinklers, nowhere to be found. To visitors, that just meant the air was thick, the corridors were cramped, and the darkness felt even more unsettling. To safety experts, it was a nightmare waiting to ignite. That night, a group of teenagers lit a lighter inside the attraction, either to see better or as a prank. Within seconds, the walls and decorations caught fire. The flames spread rapidly through the flammable structure, filling the maze with thick black smoke. Guests panicked, stumbling through pitch-black hallways, unsure of where to turn. The exits were poorly marked, and the interior design made it easy to get lost. 8 teenagers never made it out. They were trapped inside, overcome by smoke and flames. By the time firefighters brought the blaze under control, the haunted castle had been reduced to smoldering wreckage. The public outcry was immediate and fierce. Parents demanded to know how such a large theme park could operate a building without basic fire safety systems. Six Flags executives were charged with criminal negligence and faced manslaughter charges. Their defense argued that the fire was arson, not corporate failure. Ultimately, they were acquitted. But the trial revealed shocking lapses in oversight. The tragedy led to sweeping changes in safety codes for amusement attractions across the United States. Haunted houses, dark rides, and temporary structures were suddenly subject to stricter inspections, mandatory sprinklers, and fire alarms. What had once been treated as harmless carnival fun was reclassified as a serious fire hazard. Six Flags demolished the remains of the haunted castle and never rebuilt it. For survivors and families of the victims, the memory of that night still hangs heavy. What was supposed to be a silly scare turned into real horror, exposing the price of cutting corners in the pursuit of profit. 29. Tsunami M&D's Theme Park, Scotland, UK. In the small town of Motherwell, Scotland, M&D's theme park proudly called itself Scotland's theme park. Its most eye-catching attraction was the Tsunami, an inverted steel coaster that flipped riders upside down 5 times while dangling their legs in the air. For years, it was a local thrill until June 26, 2016, when the ride derailed in front of stunned families. That summer afternoon, one of the trains was packed with kids and adults when it suddenly left the rails at nearly 40 miles per hour. Witnesses described a terrifying scene, the car smashing into a support beam before crashing to the ground in a tangled heap of metal. Screams filled the air as parents and bystanders rushed to help. Miraculously, no one was killed, but 10 people, mostly children, were injured, some seriously. The aftermath exposed just how careless the park had been. Investigators discovered that key repairs to the ride's axle system had been carried out with the wrong type of metal. The welds were so poor that failure was inevitable. Even worse, just weeks before the crash, inspectors had signed off on the ride as safe. That stamp of approval turned out to be meaningless, as the accident proved. For locals, the accident was a wake-up call. M&Ds had already been criticized for a string of breakdowns and mishaps over the years, and Tsunami became the final straw. The ride was dismantled not long after the crash, and the park itself saw its reputation collapse. What was supposed to be Scotland's family destination became known instead for one of the UK's worst modern amusement accidents. What makes Tsunami's story so strange isn't just the derailment, but the way it highlighted systemic problems in small theme parks, underfunded maintenance, rushed inspections, and a reliance on outdated equipment that would never pass muster at larger parks. The ride wasn't just a fluke, it was a symptom of bigger issues. Parents who had once trusted M&Ds to be a safe day out were left questioning how such a preventable disaster could have happened in the first place. Tsunami became a cautionary tale across the UK amusement industry, forcing regulators to tighten scrutiny on smaller parks that had previously flown under the radar. 30. Cannonball Loop, Action Park, New Jersey, USA. Few rides capture the phrase, "What were they thinking?" quite like the Cannonball Loop at Action Park in Vernon, New Jersey. If the name alone sounds reckless, the design was even worse. A fully enclosed water slide ending in a complete vertical loop, like something out of a cartoon. In the mid-1980s, this park already had a reputation as the most dangerous theme park in America. But the Cannonball Loop took things to another level. The concept was simple on paper. Riders launched themselves down a steep, dark tunnel, picked up enough speed to make it through a 360-degree loop, and splashed out at the bottom. The reality was chaos. Test runs using sandbags showed that many didn't make it all the way around. They got stuck at the top of the loop, piling on top of each other until workers cut an emergency hatch to pull them out. When live human testing began, staff members were reportedly offered cash bonuses to give it a try. Some emerged battered and bruised. Others came out with bloody noses, missing teeth, or worse. The slide briefly opened to the public in the summer of 1985, and almost immediately, injuries piled up. Riders complained of head trauma from slamming into the slide's fiberglass shell. Some even got stuck inside, needing to be rescued. A few unlucky ones hit the trapdoor-like hatch where earlier riders had been pulled free, leaving them cut and dazed. After a handful of weeks and countless accidents, the state shut the Cannonball Loop down. Action Park, true to form, kept trying to reopen it throughout the late 80s and 90s, tinkering with the design, but never solving its obvious flaws. The ride became more of a local legend than an actual attraction, with its towering loop looming over the park like a dare nobody should accept. By the 2000s, the slide was gone for good, dismantled and erased from the property. But the Cannonball Loop remains one of the strangest rides ever built, because it never should have existed at all. It wasn't the product of careful engineering. It was the product of a park where rules were loose, safety was optional, and spectacle mattered more than survival. The legacy of the Cannonball Loop is half horror story, half urban myth. For anyone who ever visited Action Park, it was the ultimate symbol of how far the park was willing to push the limits of common sense. And for the unlucky riders who braved it, the bruises and scars told the real story.